just trying to find like the best scheduling process, which I just saw you just released like a quarantine LSAT guide, so that's going to be very helpful. um, but yeah, it just seems like, well, I'll just kind of, to give some context, I'll backtrack. I joined a LSAT course prep via the Princeton Review. So I've been doing that for about like a month. We started like the end of January-ish. And so it's like March, we'll be going by like a month, almost a month and a half. And I just feel like I'm not grasping the information. And I'm trying to find a way to incorporate the information to where I can get it, so I can kind of start picking up my pacing a little bit, as well as like trying to juggle school and work all at the same time. So I guess I'm really just curious about your understanding, or like maybe your perspective on that, and a better way to do it. Because right now, what I'll try to do in my week is like Monday is the start of my school week. So I try to like get all my reading done at least by Wednesday. So I try to like incorporate like little areas later in the afternoon to do LSAT work. And I'm just curious if there's like a better approach, I guess.
Sure. It's a very common struggle. I can certainly relate myself personally as well. It's hard to find blocks of time to get a lot done. So when you say these short periods here and there, how long are these periods?
I would say like roughly like an hour or two. The way that we have it scheduled for like my actual LSAT class is from 5 to 8:30 on Saturday and Sunday. So during the week, because homework will be due Friday evening, what I'll try to do is try to block it out, but it seems like it's more like a rush job and not really retaining any information. Is really just trying to like, okay, I think that piece might go there. I think this may be relevant, and like trying to do it that way. But it's really not working. And I know it's not working because like from the scoring that it like kind of does in the homework section, like that doesn't reflect any of what I'm doing. And the section itself will have like a review of why you got the question wrong, but it's not as helpful as like maybe a person telling me why I got the question wrong, as opposed to just like, hey, this is the reason why this is right and why it's wrong. Like, okay, but why did I think that this was the right answer?
Yes, that is the key question, is to get inside your own thought process to realize where you may have gone wrong as you were attempting the questions. And that process takes time. It takes a lot of time. It can take, in my classes, it can take an entire hour to go over one question.
Okay.
So if you have a 1 hour block of time or an hour and a half, 2 hours, you might not get through that many questions, but you can review them well in depth during that time. So the question is, how are you going to choose to spend that limited time here and there in those late afternoons? It could be doing an individual timed section, takes 35 minutes. You've got enough time to do 2 or 3 of those potentially. Or you might want to use that time to watch one of the course lesson videos. It's another option.
Okay.
You can use it to go through homework problems, drilling questions by type, perhaps. I'm curious to hear though, so let's say you have these 3.5 hour long classes. Mm-hmm. What are those like for you?
Mostly really overwhelming. Really just like trying to, because it's a bunch of people in one class, which I'm totally fine with. It's like a regular class, but we're going through a lot of information in that short time frame. And I think what would be helpful, like kind of like what you're saying, is using a full hour to go over a certain question or a certain type of question, to really break down the understanding. Whereas in the class, it's very much like we're going to go through, we'll cover the entire unit. And then in that unit will be a mixed bag of logic games. We'll do reading comprehension and like, you know, so on and so on and so forth. And in that time of 3 hours, we'll have like a 10 or 15-minute break. We're doing like maybe 10 or so questions on our own, in which, especially for logic games, that's just my struggle. I can openly admit to that. It just seems like I'll get the first question, like with the deductions and the what's the word? Contrapositives and like all of those. I'll get it, but as soon as I get after the first question, because the first question is usually the easiest question, after that, it's over my head. The information is gone. It's no longer relevant. And I try to stay checked in and like try to like wrestle with the information a little bit, but it seems to be very draining.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like you're covering a lot of different things during that 1 3.5 hour class session. And if there's a logic game that gives you trouble, wouldn't you like to be able to go in depth on that one logic game and make sure you really get it?
Yes, exactly.
So I'm going to be honest, the 3.5 hour long class doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially if it's online. I mean, I get that pre-COVID in-person classes, there are logistical reasons to, if you're getting people together anyway, minimize the commuting time.
Right.
They have to book the room. They have to physically book a room somewhere. But this model that you're using for your class, this is an online course, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really make sense to me to do the exact same thing when you don't have those logistical barriers anymore, the commuting time, the room booking. This seems to be that they've just taken literally what was in person and put it online, when there are benefits to getting people together, but why do it in that way? Mm-hmm. So I'd say, I mean, my classes in my course are just 1 hour long, and we'll go in depth on one logic game or one reading comp passage or a couple of logical reasoning questions of a certain type. Mm-hmm. But a 3.5 hour block chunk of time to cover several different things and throw that whole variety at you, there may not be enough time to actually go in depth on the things you really need. So, yes. I mean, you're in that course. I know they're not going to take your feedback into account and change things midway through. So I mean, take from that course whatever benefit you can get, since it's already paid for, and assuming you want to stick with it. But I would recommend that you take at least the time that you can on your end with those late afternoon, hour-long or 2-hour-long blocks to not take the general survey approach, but rather to don't replicate what they're doing in class. Instead, modify that to your needs, perhaps so that one logic game that gave you trouble, go in depth on that one logic game.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because exactly what you're saying is something I've kind of been tracking. I was like, it's just so much for a 3-hour time frame. And like the reading comp, I feel like I can get like no problem. It's really just like looking for specific information to answer some questions. But it seems like, yeah, when it comes to logic games, it's really, we'll kind of like just breeze through, and you have other people who were doing, I think it's called like the chain method or something like that. They're doing that, whereas opposed like we're learning like the specific game piece setup. So it gets kind of confusing because, you know, he'll kind of cover the way one person is doing it. I'm like, oh, like maybe that is an easier way to do it. And maybe that's why like people are getting it like easier and quicker than I am, as opposed to the way that he's teaching and the way that he apparently is saying that the LSAT is going to be on, like taking it on actual testing. So I'm just curious, like, are there easier ways, I guess, to understand logic games, or is it really just like beating yourself with the information for a long period of time?
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's a mix, right? I mean, the LSAT is not easy, and it's no reflection on any individual if you have trouble with logic games. I mean, I had plenty of trouble with logic games. It took me a long time to get it. It's not where my natural thinking comes from. So exposure to a wide variety of problems and the practice will help you get it over time. So that to me is like, okay, well, throwing a lot of volume at yourself to getting to see the patterns even on a subconscious level. So I hope that's better than beating yourself with it. I mean, you can do a couple of games and review them and watch my explanation videos and such and go back and forth and do some more problems and look at the explanations and come to class and look at the explanations and walk through them in class too. That's one way you can approach it. And then you can see different styles as well. So the way I explain it might be different than the way that one of my instructors explains it. There's a variety of valid approaches. There's not only one way to do it. I think my way is great, but it may not work for every single person, and I'm okay with that. That's why I brought other people into the mix to share different diagramming styles. So there may be easier ways than what you're learning in your class. I mean, I'll be honest, Princeton Review strategies are not my favorite ones out there. There are other ones that I think work better. I love conditional chains. I think they work like magic once you get them. So that could be worth exploring to see if that might click for you better than a different style. But there are a variety of valid ways to do the same exact problems. There are plenty of top scorers who do things all different ways. So I think, again, going deeper on one problem. So one logic thing that gives you trouble, see how a couple of different people approach it, and then see which way works best for you, and then adopt that going forward. But I'm definitely not dogmatic about this.
Got it. Okay. I'm trying to think if I have any more questions. I think the majority of my questions are roughly about the scheduling and logic games. Those seem to be my most hardest areas.
The other thing I would suggest is if this class, I mean, I assume that these 3.5 hour long weekend classes, they're recorded. You may not need to attend them live at all or in their entirety. I wonder if there are better ways you can use a 3.5 hour block of time than attending that class live where they're giving you all that variety. What if you said, when I have a Saturday from 5 to 8:30 blocked off, that was going to be attending a live class for that entire duration? What if you instead took a practice test and reviewed it immediately afterwards, or at least part of it immediately afterwards, while your thought process was still fresh from having just done it?
Right.
Or maybe you do so assuming you're doing like when are you taking the LSAT? What's your target test date?
The way that the program I'm in has it set up, we'll be taking it in June, like the weekend of June 5th.
Great. Okay. So
at least that's,
Yeah. Okay. So the LSAT for June is actually June 12th. Maybe there's some outdated date there, but it's so you have one more week than you might have thought. But anyway, so you've got about 3 months. You're taking it June. That's the last LSAT Flex administration with 3 sections and no experimental section. So it's 3 sections back to back and you're done. So that takes approximately 2 hours. So if you have a 3.5 hour block of time, you could do those 3 sections back to back, simulate the pacing, simulate the endurance. Those 2 hours are complete. You then give yourself a short break, maybe eat something, go to the bathroom, stretch your legs a little bit, then return to the exam, grade it, and review maybe a couple of problems that gave you trouble while they're still fresh for you. So you could do all of that in a 3.5 hour period. And I wonder if doing that once a week between now and test day might serve you more than the class with the going at a fast pace and giving you that wide variety of things all at once. Something to potentially consider.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because this past weekend I was wiped out. I was tired of it, so I skipped going this week. But I think that actually would be beneficial is like trying to mitigate how being in class live as opposed to like just watching the recording and maybe pausing on a certain section and then reviewing that certain section on my own and then coming back with questions and seeing how that works. Yeah.
Or if you were going to attend live, what could you do during the live class to maximize the value you got out of being there live? So asking questions, participating, typing in the chat, speaking if that's part of the format do they allow speaking in the class? Is that part of the format?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Generally, he'll just kind of like go through certain questions and call on certain people, and we'll do it that way. So I try to be as engaged as possible to like really make sure I'm mulling over the information. But there just isn't enough time to ask for like a thorough understanding of a question.
Yeah, I hear that. So do what you can to make it worthwhile. Do what you can to maximize the value that you're getting out of it, and also see what you can do with 3.5 hours on your end too. Cool. Any other questions for today?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think those were majority of my questions. It's really just timing and pacing, but well, also logic games. But I think you pretty much well covered all of those.
Great. All right. Well, I'm glad we connected. Keep in touch and let me know if you need anything moving forward. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Of course. My pleasure. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.